You spent 6 months getting everything ready. You launched your e-commerce store 18 months ago and things are going swimmingly. Look at your pricing again. The simplest way of increasing average order value is finding out that your $30 item will actually sell for $35 and you really won't have much of a decrease in sales. People forget that constantly. They're on pricing from 10 years ago. So it's just a really simple thing and you can split test that quite easily.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Most e-commerce companies remain busy chasing new customers and visitors to the site, and they ignore the average order value, also known as deal size in the traditional world. There are several ways to increase your average order value, such as trying different pricing experiments, bundling, upsell, and cross-sell. But you would not know what's going to work unless you design suitable experiments and measure them accurately. In today's episode, we invited a panel of cross-functional experts for a live interview on LinkedIn who brings significant expertise to discuss measuring and increasing average order value. We covered many grounds in this episode, including why average value matters for e-commerce companies and the specific strategies to increase it. Finally, we discussed how to A/B test various strategies and how it can help improve the average order value. With that, let's get to the conversation.
Hey guys, welcome to today's show. And today we have a very exciting topic. It is going to be average order value for e-commerce. In my mind, that is also called deal size. Who doesn't want to increase their deal size? We all do. And those are the strategies that we are going to be discussing today, how to increase the deal size. So we are going to start with the intros. And Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Thanks, Sam. Chris Harrington, President and COO of Gen Alpha Technologies. We equip manufacturers, dealers, and distributors with the tools and services they need to sell their products online. So both equipment and parts online. That's our business. Typically, we're B2B, but we're also B2C. And what we're finding is uniquely part of the needs today is B2B to C. So all of that comes into play here. Great to be here.
Yes, so right. And B2B to C is always so exciting because now the business model is changing. It's difficult, but then you have additional revenue channels. And we all want as many revenue channels as possible. And then we want to increase the deal size. Okay, amazing. So Damon, I'm actually going to move to you next. Would you like to introduce yourself if you don't mind?
Sure. Damon Postalka, Exit Your Way, Managing Director and Partner. What we do is we help e-commerce and manufacturing business owners grow value and exit their companies when they want for the money they want.
Okay, amazing. And your expertise is going to be super valuable. I know that you have a lot of stories that we were chatting in the pre-show, and you will be able to share how you were able to increase the deal size for your customers. So it's going to be so exciting. Thank you so much for being here, Damon.
Thank you.
Steve, would you like to introduce yourself next, if you don't mind?
Why, thanks for the opportunity. I'd love to. Thanks for having me on this panel with these great folks. My name is Steve Rice. I am the president of .com Jungle, and we help for over 20 years. Have been helping companies make and implement wise technology choices, and so we deal a lot with them building websites and helping clients and market departments understand the levers that they can pull, and average order value is definitely one of them. So this will be a fun conversation.
It is going to be so much fun. Thank you so much for being here, Steve. And now I'm actually going to move to Ben. Ben, would you like to introduce yourself?
No, I don't think I will. No, I'm just playing. Thanks, Sam. It's fun to join this panel. This is an amazing group. My My name is Ben Searcy, and I am the Chief Customer and Chief Commercial Officer for a startup called Gobi. What we do is what we call mass customer mobilization. How do you get your customers to carry out economically relevant activities on your behalf? A lot of what that actually has to do with is increasing average order value and frequency of purchase. So I'm excited to talk about this today with some other experts in the field.
And I'm super excited to dig into those stories as well. Thank you so much for being here, Ben. Okay, so Chris, I am actually going to start with you, if you don't mind, with today's question and just setting the stage overall for our audience, especially if they are not going to be familiar with, and I like to call it as a KPI. This should be as part of the KPI, it should be part of your strategy. You should be tracking this all the time. So if, let's say, the listeners are not really familiar with what average order value is and why it matters for e-commerce companies, the B2B companies, or B2B2C companies. So to you, Chris.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to talk about it is just to make sure that people know how to measure it, right? So it is revenue divided by orders, gives you your average order value. So in our world, in equipment manufacturing and aftermarket parts, usually that's a finite world, right? So you have a finite number of customers. It's not that you're looking for new customers all the time, because there's not always the right fit for new customers. So in the end, finding the strategies to increase revenue from your existing account base or existing customers, that's really what average order value strategies are driven to do, is to get you thinking about how do you increase that. Now, I think that increasing average order value has been around for a long time, way before e-commerce, right? So it's thinking about how do you apply technology to assist you in growing your basket of goods and the revenue with the existing clients. So it's a very important metric. I thought you would call on me first because I am the data person. I always like to talk about analytics, and I think this is a very important metric that many customers do use. I don't know if you want to go right into strategies, or you were just trying to get an education on what does it mean and what does it mean to B2B and B2C today.
Yeah, let's get everybody's perspective first, what they think of it and why it matters from their perspective, and then we'll dig into the strategies. By the way, I also wanted to go to you first because you have this crisp insight all the time. You, in fact, had the formula down, and you are able to relate with the traditional strategies where, yes, the goal should always be how you can get more mileage from your existing customers. And I can almost guarantee this, Damon is going to have the same advice because obviously he's a very seasoned sales leader. So Damon, on to you. What is average order value? Why it matters from your perspective?
Well, I think Steve put a comment in there about it that just sums it up, about the best. If you can increase your average order value, you're not trying to find a new customer. It's like it's even better than increasing your conversion rate almost in some regards, because you're selling more to the existing customers that already know, like, and trust you.
Yeah.
And really, the thing that I think is super cool when you're thinking about average order value is you can actually create a win-win, because you can help the customer get what they need because they don't know everything they need. And if you're in Chris's case, working with an OEM manufacturer, that machine better than they do. And if they order this hydraulic pump, they may need this hose or this gasket and these other things. You should include that. I mean, that should be part of it, because it's a win-win, because otherwise they're out there and they go, oh, I need this other part. I think that's the practicality and the way you can do it. I think it's so important because you can better serve the customer, and it's a win-win then.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I always think, to be honest, those sales strategies, and the reason for that is because I'm the guy who always forget to get the battery pack, and then after coming home, and then I need to go back again and get the battery pack, and then, oh my goodness, then I wasted my 2 hours. So it's a huge help. Thank you so much, Damon, for that. Steve, what is average order value in your perspective? Why it matters for e-commerce companies?
I think that it can be boiled down to two very specific things. Like I posted and Damon just repeated, it's the one place, maybe there are others, one real place where you can increase your revenue without increasing your spend. And the other thing is, that I think is intriguing, is average order value thinking. I also posted this to our feed, introduces multiple levers that aren't immediately obvious to your marketing team and that they can pull individually. And it's conceptually for the marketing team, when you start thinking about average order value, you're going to come up with, and I have 14 tactics in support of that strategy. And I'm sure there are a few more as well. And each one of those is a lever. And each one of those can be implemented without a lot of fanfare in general and without a lot of technical implementation. Some of them might, but for the most part, your marketing team can have a pretty decent effect on your revenue without increasing significantly your current or long-term marketing spend.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's always going to be cheaper to get the additional revenue from your existing customers, not requiring as much effort as you are going to put into the newer customers, and the deal size is going to be probably super low as well with the newer customers because they don't trust you. They are not going to spend $100,000 on your first day. Even if they do, then they are probably going to be asking for return in 2 days. So yeah, it's not fun to deal with new customers. You always want to score more on your existing customers. Thank you so much, Steve, for that. So Ben, in your experience, what is average order value? Why it matters for e-commerce companies?
Yeah, absolutely. The rest of the panel has actually jumped in and said a lot of things I absolutely 100% agree with. I think one of the other elements that we like to look at too, though, is how do we segment after the average order value? Because that gives you a lot of interesting data. But then you can look at it and you can kind of get a sense of, I'm making up these numbers, but you have a $10 item, a $20 item, and a $30 item. And if you look at your average order value, it can kind of start giving you an idea of what items are selling. So it gives you, to Steve's point, a lever to look at. Where do we change it? How do we sell more of the higher priced item, broadly speaking, assuming that has a higher margin to work with, and then you can kind of subset things in there, and you can segment your customers based on the average order value, or you can look at it and say, okay, these are the spending thresholds I want to segment, and then you can start pulling levers in the spending threshold or a frequency threshold, along those lines. So it gives you a really, really good starting point, and a general sense of I spent X amount of dollars and I've made Y amount of dollars on average per deal. But again, tying back to what Steve said, it gives you a great starting point to kind of dive in. How do I increase that? Which of the 100 different opportunities to increase the average order value do I want to do now? Because that's the one I think is going to increase that average order value the fastest, because obviously you don't want to do 50 at the same time. You don't know what actually moved the needle. So that was a long way of saying it gives you a great starting point to make adjustments without having to recapture or find new people. I think Adobe did a case study, I think it was about 2 years ago, finding that about 40% of an e-commerce site's, on average, 40% of e-commerce sites' revenues are from repeating customers, but only about 8 to 10% of the site visitors were repeating customers. So that gives you a really interesting data point to start with and figure out, okay, great, how do we get more of those repeat customers to buy more and more often?
Yeah, completely agree with the data point. And I think you hit on a very important point about that segmentation. Sometimes a lot of businesses, when they think of the average order value, they might be thinking that, each customer is probably going to be able to pay the same amount. That's very rarely true. So you definitely have to figure out the customer groups and what they can really afford to pay. It's not just the size, it's going to be geography that matters. It's going to be their willingness to spend. It could be their paycheck. There are so many different factors that really matter in case of average order value. And if you don't have that understanding, you are going to be spending a lot of marketing dollars just chasing after customers that will not give you additional revenue just because they don't care for it. So thank you so much, Ben, for that. So now let's talk about the strategy. So Chris, I know you had a lot of stories that you wanted to talk about, and I know I'm probably going to get a list right now. And some of those lists is going to be related to data and analytics. So, okay, So how to improve the average order value? Let's say if I'm the e-commerce business owner, obviously I have figured out that it's easier to get additional revenue from the existing customers. Now I'm trying to improvise that. So how do I do it?
Yeah. It sounds like Steve's got a list of 14 how-tos, the tactical piece. So I think what I want to make sure, because we just touched on it. So I want to highlight a few things in just the analysis of it first before we get into the tactics, because I think that's really, really key. So, as you're looking, I think a lot of people, look at average order value in aggregate, and we do want to break it down to customer, industry, other values, and we want to look at our order history to identify buying trends within those groups, okay? Because any strategy or tactic we're going to take is typically going to come from things that we're learning related to the trends that we're seeing and the buying patterns within all of the different ways that we can segment average order value. So I would really encourage that. Some of the common tactics when it comes to e-commerce specifically is going to come around product recommendations, right? So upselling, cross-selling, bundling. I think a few of us used some examples. In our world, if I can just jump into examples, because then I'll give Steve his chance to go through his list. We see things, and again, think about equipment manufacturers. That equipment has a life. They're either buying new equipment or they're buying components for those products. So things that they sell to increase the average order value for existing customers are things like training packages. So any training that they can offer, whether it's on-site or online, can be an upsell, and it's something new that they haven't been getting before as far as revenue, maybe from an existing customer. Warranty packages. So any extended warranties are some things that we've seen our customers do to increase that average order value. Service packages. So if there's a service package that can either go with a component replacement or a new piece of equipment, that can be a great way. And that goes into that bundling type strategy to increase the average order value. So we do see customers employ those tactics. What's another one? An exchange program. So exchange programs we see quite frequently. And not only will that increase the average order value, but it will also deliver some recurring revenue. So it's not a one-time average order value. It's helping you in the long term with some recurring revenue. So those are typical strategies that we're seeing in our world that maybe in some of the other experiences here that would be slightly different. One thing I will say, because in our businesses, there's a transition, right? So there's still a lot of business offline that's coming through a customer service department, and there's business happening online, and that transition is growing where they're doing more online. I encourage everybody to look at average order value of your online sales and average order value of your offline sales.
Yeah.
Which one is higher? And ask yourself why. So what is happening in that difference, and can you deploy a strategy from that learning as well? So those are some few tactics and ideas with respect to the customers that we're working with and the things that we're seeing.
So great insight about the segmentation and data. Data is really a plug, to be honest. I mean, that is probably going to be my plug as well from now on, because data is so important for e-commerce. And if you really don't understand, or if you don't segment well, you mentioned some of the variables such as your industry, which is going to be a huge factor, because each of the industries, they operate very differently, especially in the B2B world. So that's a great way of segmenting your data, segmenting your customer groups, and designing strategies around that. The other thing that you mentioned, such as comparing the average order value of your online and offline channels, and really trying to figure out if there is a way to manage that. I don't know if in your experience you have seen getting revenue for the same offering using both channels. I don't know how many companies really do that. I don't know if they sort of segment different SKUs across the channel. So in your experience, when you look at the equipment world, are they going to have separate SKUs for the e-commerce channel versus the traditional channel, or are they trying to sell everything in the e-commerce as well as in the traditional?
Typically, they're selling everything in both. But I do find that oftentimes average order values or even margins, and you can go into some other data points, are higher online because there's standard pricing at play. So there's no salesperson, there's no customer service representative who is negotiating a price or deviating from your standard pricing. So what we would hope is that through online sales, you're growing your margins and you're growing your average order value. But I say it's something that you can compare, because it might encourage a conversation internally to move more people online. That's why I always encourage people, what is your percentage of business online? That's a metric people need to know. And then if you're seeing higher revenues online and you're seeing higher margins online, then it should help with the motivation to grow your business online. So get your sales team involved, get your marketing team involved, get the buy-in that you need across the organization, because, hey, the dollars are proving it out that we need to move in this direction.
I completely agree. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. So, Damon, I'm actually going to move to you. I know that you had, compelling stories from your field experiences, because you have lived through it, right? I mean, so you have really increased the average order value of these businesses. So, give me the whole story. What were these businesses? What were they trying to sell? What were their challenges? How they actually increased the average order value?
All right, Sam. Thanks. Well, I'm still processing through what Chris said, because there was a lot of gold in there, and if people aren't, I would just go back and listen to that if I was trying to take notes. But we aren't selling big ticket items like $1 million piece of equipment or something like that typically in our clients. But a few things that we've really noticed. First of all, to Chris's point about using the data to understand, you need to understand it based on product category, platform you're selling on. There's seasonality we've used, and if you're selling a Christmas product compared to a summer product, there's all kinds of things that you need to do, because you really, as at the end of the day, I also think back to Chris's point that you need to understand your margin in those categories, because if you've got a lot of SKUs, whether you're an OEM producing, like a Caterpillar producing a whole bunch of different kinds of products, you need to understand where are my margins. Is my product category really supporting the margins that I want, and the average order value size, because whether we like it or not, there's a processing cost in each order, and we can typically in e-commerce get that low, but there's a cost to process an order, and we need to understand what that is. And that's honestly a lot of work we do with automation and the kind of stuff that Steve can do with their technology and the way they do it to reduce the order processing costs and make that easy. But typically what we're doing is there's two things, and people have mentioned a lot of these, the bundling, because you understand the products better than other people. And this works for a bicycle sale or $1 million piece of equipment. The other thing that I thought was really interesting too, that even on some of our clients are using financing, right? And some people use it, some people don't. But when we're buying online, you see that option. That option makes a difference in average order value. Yeah. It makes a difference in conversion rate as well. But in the average order value, when you combine those two things, you can really drive your average order value up, especially if they're products that are nice to have with that product that they just bought, and it would maybe extend the life or something like that. It's like with the bicycle, you're going to get, I don't know, something, a cover or something that just to make it, or a stand to put it up in the wall. Those are the kind of things that you can do to increase that average order value size. And then over time, as you say, understanding where your average order value is bigger, because it's remarkable when you study the geography of the United States and you go, okay, a bicycle purchaser in the US in Arizona may have a completely different average order value than the bicycle purchaser in Montana, and it'll surprise you what they are, and it'll move you around to where you really want to focus your marketing efforts to truly maximize your return on your ad spend and other things. But the average order value is always, it starts back in the I wrote the number down. Vistaprint has been doing it for years. The cheap little business card thing, and I shouldn't say cheap. They do a good job. But what they say, oh, you need letterhead, you need this, you need that, you got 100 things you got to say no to get out of that. I mean, they've mastered the art in their industry of doing that, and you see that now so much more with the consumer brands. Just pick one that's a good quality brand, and I can guarantee if you're spending $500 on a Traeger smoker, they're going to try to sell you the cover and pellets and everything else you can think of for that smoker before you leave, and make it super easy for you to get it. That's how you do it.
So some amazing insights there, Damon, and I love the example about Vistaprint, and the reason for that is because they came from a very traditional industry. It's called print industry, and right now, even today, okay, if you look at the print industry, they are very legacy, very traditional, and they have automated the complete process of manufacturing to order to customer service to everything, and they did for the dollar ticket item for like $1 or $5. It's phenomenal the kind of work they have put in there and the kind of efficiency they have. It's just amazing piece of art is how I like to define from the process efficiency perspective. Some of your other comments related to your different states, I think that's a very key distinction as well. And I don't know if a lot of companies really track the average order margin along with the average order value. Just because you are able to increase the average order value of the order, I don't know if that is going to be profitable for you or not. I don't know if those margins are typically tracked, but that could be another thing to look at as well, especially when you are selling in different market, because cost to sell in different market could be slightly different. And the other thing that you mentioned related to processing costs, so I'm actually going to have a follow-up question for you. If you have seen the processing cost measured, especially when you are going to compare the traditional channel as well as your e-commerce channel, because now we are talking about the sales commission. We are talking about the retail store, the way Steve likes to describe it. There are just so many cost elements, and I can almost guarantee that all of that is really not tracked, and a lot more costs are going to be tracked in e-commerce because they are traceable. So what is your experience in tracking the cost of processing for transactions, Damon?
I've not done it. I've quite honestly not done it, and it's simply because most of my clients they're either doing traditional sales or they're not. They're doing e-commerce sales, but you're exactly right. You mentioned the things, and Chris also did too on the margin side of it. You don't have those costs, but the one thing you do is there still are internal costs to whatever you're doing to pack and ship and those kind of things if you're doing an item like that or get something ready to deliver. But in the traditional sales channel, you do have when you look at it, there can be a lot more or about the same, because we also have an exchange for some different marketing and things like that you have to account for. But in the internal processing costs, you can, if you're doing it manually or somewhat manually compared to e-commerce, it's just labor savings, which can be significant depending on order volumes. Because most people think about order volumes in manufacturing. If you got, just say in a manufacturer, you got 1,000 orders a day. Well, that might be a big deal. But when you talk about consumer e-commerce or something like that, you can have tens of thousands of orders a day. And when you talk about taking out milliseconds in some of these things, it makes a lot of difference.
I think that increasing average order value with some of the tactics can be a lot more automated in e-commerce versus outside of an e-commerce channel. So what's happening, so Damon brings up a really good point, because a lot of times your customer service people, right, they're so busy, bogged down, emails, fax, phone calls, that they're not proactively doing the things to increase average order value. Whereas when you deploy these strategies that we're talking about today, they pop up for that customer. They give them this win-win value opportunity that Steve mentioned, and then they go from there. So it helps to increase that average order value. The other comment that I would make is that sometimes we have to be careful, and this is an old argument in any company, right? So you might decrease your margin %, but your margin dollars are going up. So while you're increasing your average order value, you might be increasing your margin dollars, but the margin percent falls. I've always been of the belief that I want more margin dollars, so give it to me. The dollars are what rule. But so it's always things that you have to be looking at when you're looking at that data.
Yeah, and just one comment on Damon's commentary that whatever labor savings you are going to get, Chris is actually going to convert all of those guys in the database analyst. They all are going to be analyzing the data. Because you really need to do that, to be honest. I mean, you really need to have that information about your company, and that's how you are going to know where you should be allocating your efforts. Each of the companies really need to do that. So, Steve, I'm actually going to move to you next. Okay, what are your experiences and stories that you might be able to share in employing these strategies to increase the average order value?
Well, I want to echo what Damon and Chris are talking about in terms of contribution margin, because that's really where it's at, right? And to give a quick example, I have a multi-million-dollar client that we took from about 1% of their sales were internet to 18% of their sales. And for those of you out there who like to do math, that 18% of that company's sales represents 78% of the contribution margin that pays for everything in the company. And the other 82% represents the balance of that. So much so that when we help them separate, we're not bookkeepers, but we help them conceptually separate the two entities. The total profit for their B2B company was actually the same value as their rebate from UPS that year. So you really need to think about your direct-to-consumer channels. And so additionally, we've talked about some great tactics and strategies. Chris brought up 7 of one of which I thought was going to be my little sneak attack, and she beat me to it. And that was establishing the superior customer service teams, because you can really have a high effect on the quality of the people who come back to buy by actually treating them really well personally, right? So with that, if we're going to talk about additional tactics, I'm going to add, you gain their trust through social proof, which is basically reviews, but real ones, not fake stuffed ones. And you can offer a discounted gift card with a purchase. That's one that people, I think, overlook quite a bit, because they're not necessarily thinking about what they're thinking about is, they bought this one thing. Maybe I can get them to buy, maybe they bought a desktop sharpener for axes. Maybe I can get them to buy a little knife sharpener too. They're not thinking about something like a gift card. So I think that one's a nice one because it's a little bit outside the box. The other one that I think people don't often think about, and I'll go back to sanders or knife sharpeners, is to offer, if you have replaceable parts like sanding belts is an obvious one, they do wear out, you should be offering a subscription for maybe semi-annual replacement parts to be automatically sent to that person. And if there's somebody who knows that they use this often, they might opt for a 3-month subscription, and you might sell a packet of 6 belts every 3 months, and you didn't really have to do anything for it, right? So additionally, like really high quality customer service things, I think, are where it's at. Like if you establish a really obvious flexible return policy, people are going to be willing to pay more. Mountain Gear is in the outdoor industry, does this to tremendous effect, and has just wiped the industry clean of competitors doing it. And Sweetwater is one that I've mentioned that does this too. Those are all great ways to increase your average order value, because it all just boils down to trust. And lastly, COVID has changed a lot of things, as we know. And I'm finding that a bunch of our clients are starting to develop high quality products that are maybe a level above ones that they've currently sold through B2B channels and on their websites, and they're not offering it through their B2B channel. They're leveraging the relationships with their own brand, essentially, with the customers they have, to only offer that as a special product on their own website. So, and they're doing that in a way where they're not angering, their dealers are sort of upset, saying like, can't I have that product? But at least they're not saying, why are you selling the same product I have for $5 less? Or what's most common, why are you even selling it at all? Why are you competing with me? So that addition of new products that aren't available elsewhere is one of the prime things I'm seeing B2B, B2C companies do right now that's having a tremendous effect on their contribution margin.
Okay, some great insights, Steve, especially about the flexible return policy. And I am probably going to have a story for you guys related to that. So, in my MBA classroom, when I was studying, at that time, there was a comment from a person, and especially when you are sitting with 70 different people, you don't want to come across as if you are cheap. So, one of the comment in that class was, I love Walmart. And everybody's sort of shocked that, you know what? Sometimes you might say that, you know what, I like to go to Walmart or whatever, but she's like, you know, I love Walmart. And everybody is super shocked in the class. And we are like, okay, why do you love Walmart? Maybe she's cheap. That's going to be the immediate conclusion that, you know, she's trying to save money. Okay, you love going to Walmart because you are probably going to get the deal and you are probably going to get the best match deal. But then she said, you know what? I love Walmart because of the return policy that they have. That their return policy is the best. Okay, it is going to be 6 months. You can return anything and everything that you like. Even if you use it, you can probably return it. So you are absolutely right. The return policy can have significant impact in increasing your average order value and retention for companies like Walmart that are not known for their product quality. So you can imagine how much effect that could have. So customer service, obviously, you know, in my mind, when you talk about the flexible return policy, the customer service is actually part of that. So again, some people don't think that, you know what, Walmart is going to have the best customer service. But in this particular case, in my mind, I think Walmart is actually offering one of the best customer service because people are going there not because of their product. They are going there because of the customer service. The other comment that you made is related to the subscription. And the subscription has become the industry in itself. And the reason why I like your example is because you have pointed out something related to the existing players, how they can utilize subscription in their model to increase the average order value. And I don't know how many manufacturers and the distributors and the retailers are really thinking of utilizing the subscription as part of their business model. And this could be a great strategy to retain your customers to increase the average order value. So I'm actually going to move to Ben. Ben, what are your stories so far? What have you seen in your experience that really worked to increase the average order value in your customer segment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to mention beforehand, I'm going to recap on everything everyone else has already spoken about just a little bit as I go through this, because there's some really good stuff in there. There's things that everyone should be doing because they simply work. Even Damon, your point about the financing, you know, there's some very, very well-known companies that right on there, it's, you know, if it's less than $500, you get 6-month interest free, but $501, you get a year interest free. Now that $1 may not sound like much, but usually what happens is people will then jump in and say, okay, well, I can actually afford interest free. I can afford something for $900 instead of the $350 item I was going to get. So I think that is one that I think a lot of people really need to look at as an option. But in terms of real world elements, one of the things that I think helps a lot is, in general, Nielsen came out with a study a little while ago that said 84% of people rate recommendations, specifically by friends and family, but general social proof, to Steve's point, as the most important factor in a purchasing decision. There's a follow-up study that came, I apologize, I can't remember where it came from, but it said that for every 0.1 star you are below 4 stars, so 3.9, 3.8, 3.7, et cetera, you reduce the chance that someone is going to buy from you by 11%. So the social proof in general is hugely important. So, of course, by increasing that, going around with the best customer service, the great return policies, higher quality items, you know, everything we've been talking about, you will increase your ratings, especially product ratings. Another thing I wanted to touch on is something that we found. A Starbucks study came out and said for every $10 gift card, the average purchase price is about $16, roughly speaking. I'm rounding out the numbers here. But to Steve's point about offering gift cards, or, you know, Kohl's does this extraordinarily well. You go in, you buy $50 for the stuff, they give you a $5 Kohl's cash for the next time you're in. Well, there's nothing there for $5. You're going to spend more. So those are, you know, one of the things that we have found particularly important. especially because, and this kind of goes more into the customer psychology side of things, but there are a lot of companies out there who's like coupon, coupon, coupon. That's fine, except if you're always doing coupons without some other action associated with it, you're devaluing your product. If I'm buying a $10 product for $5 two or three times, it's a $5 product now. I'm not going to buy it for $10. So by requiring some action, a purchase action in the case of Kohl's, generally speaking, you have changed the psychology in someone's mind of earning the discount, which will increase the amount they'll spend in the future with you, as opposed to being entitled to a discount, if that makes sense. There's and just a couple of pretty basic ones. We've talked about purchasing thresholds. Spend $300, save $30. Those are tactics that people can use. Bundles, to circle back around, buy this and the two other things you're going to get. Yeah, you may reduce your margin on each one of those individually, but you're going to sell a lot more. Contribution margin is going to be better. Shipping threshold. Shopify did a really interesting study that I actually read about yesterday, using a couple of their people and their stores, and they found that you take your average order value, and the best price point to get people to increase for free shipping is 30% above your average order value. Now, of course, that's not going to work for everyone. If you're talking about $1 million average order value, you're probably already doing free shipping at that point. But that's just a general rule of thumb that will change by industry, by individual, etc. But the last thing I wanted to talk about, I realize I'm churning through a lot of these really quickly because I want to be conscious of time and we can dive into these. But one I think a lot of people forget about is you spent 6 months getting everything ready. You launched your e-commerce store 18 months ago and things are going swimmingly. Look at your pricing again. The simplest way of increasing average order value is finding out that your $30 item will actually sell for $35 and you really won't have much of a decrease in sales. People forget that constantly. They're on pricing from 10 years ago. So it's just a really simple thing, and you can split test that quite easily. You can just run through 1,000 customers, 500 get this price, 500 get this price, and you look at your conversion rates. So anyway, all of those very quick, very down and dirty tactics, but not dirty in terms of bad, just general statement. Those are all items that I've found in the past that have worked really well. We did actually have one of our clients figured out by sending out incentives to people that they're actually able to increase their price point by 22%. And people would pay. Their reduction in sales was like 2% fewer sales for a 22% increase. And that was almost all margin.
I did a calculation for a client recently where we just did, as a thought study, what it would look like if they increased the price of every product in the catalog by $5. And the price range of their stuff was roughly like $35 to $450. And the idea was, what does that look like in terms of your contribution margin? And the really great question, which the answer should be obvious, is what does that look like to the bottom line? Because there's no cost to doing this other than a lack of sales or a reduction in sales that could happen because you did it, right? So the obvious question was, how much would our sales have to go down in order for us to actually make less money, meaning like the pennies in the owner, stakeholder's pocket at the end of the day? And that little $5 amount, we figured out you'd have to have something like a 64% decrease in revenue for it to actually make the company lose money. And when we asked, what are the chances of a 64% decrease in revenue? The answer was goose egg. So that's the value of valuing your product is something that's really important. It's something that Patagonia and North Face figured out a long time ago, and why they took their pricing strategy all the way to the Supreme Court and won in the 80s so that they could demand the value, the quality, and the price that they were producing.
Okay, some amazing stories and insights there, guys. Ben, I want to make sure that I am touching on some of the points that you had mentioned. And boy, it almost seems like you had done like exam preparation here, because I don't know where those data points are coming from, to be honest. I mean, you are able to pull these studies from somewhere, but those are amazing data points. By the way, I hated Kohl's when I was there in the US. In Canada, you don't have Kohl's. And the reason why I hated Kohl's is because every weekend, okay, my wife will say that, you know what, we are going to Kohl's. And I'm like, okay, why are we going to Kohl's again? And the reason would be like, you know what, I got $10 last time, and I have to go to Kohl's to spend that. I'm like, you are going to go to Kohl's today and they are going to give you one more $10. And then you're going to go to Kohl's. Oh my goodness, I lived my life in Kohl's. So Qualls is extremely smart, but I hate it from the bottom of my heart just because of that. Thank you so much, Ben, for that. Okay, Chris, I'm actually going to move to you for the next question, and that is going to be related to A/B testing. Okay, A/B test. When you look at the A/B testing, and obviously a lot of people might not be familiar with what A/B testing is, but if you really want to analyze the data, if you want to see what is really working in your case when it comes to your strategies for increasing the average order value, are there any specific strategies or insights that you have got, or do you know about any best practices in employing the A/B testing to increase the average order value?
Well, I would go back to something we just talked about, which was adjusting price. And I would say that the great thing about e-commerce and the data that you get is that you can see how many times somebody searches for something and then immediately convert. Okay. And there are two elements for why they're converting. It's either price or availability, or price and availability, right? So if all the time that they come, they buy it, you need to look at your price and your availability. If it's always on the shelf, then, or even sometimes it's not on the shelf and they're still buying it, then you probably have some room to move your price. And that can be a test for you where you can adjust the price up because people just keep buying. Now, if people search for something and they're not buying it, and it's happening regularly, you can see the data. Every time this product searched for, they're not buying it. Then you look at, was there inventory? If there was no inventory, put some inventory on the shelf and see if that changes. So that becomes your test, right? And now if they're buying, great. If you've got the inventory on the shelf, they're still searching, they're still not buying, then there's probably either something wrong with your price, which is typically what it is, or maybe you just don't have the right information to validate for them the confidence. So I'm assuming that you've put the right content out there, you've got a nice image, they have confidence to buy it from you. But price and availability can be some triggers that you can pull to test and then change the results of the search to order. And then ultimately that should be driving up, especially if you get to raise your pricing. So that should be driving up your average order value. So that's some level of testing that I've actually seen done. And we go out of our way to help our customers measure that because we think it's a key opportunity.
Yeah, so I really like the way you are describing the A/B test, and I think that should be done in the phases. You need to analyze all your experiments and the variables and the phases, and then take one step at a time to be able to understand what is really working and what is not working for your A/B test. And you are so right that you don't want to probably lead the conversation with price. I think that is what any sophisticated sales leader is going to say. There are going to be a lot of different factors. I mean, see, if you are going to reduce the price, you are probably going to lose money and you are probably not going to get that customer again. So don't lead with the price.
Yeah, and I would just say too, some of these other strategies of bundling or upselling or cross-selling. So when you are recommending other products, you can do tests to see if when you made that recommendation, did they in fact buy it, right? If they didn't, then maybe you have to adjust your recommendation. But again, here with experience, I will tell customers, don't recommend products that you don't have in inventory. If you're going to run coupons or you're going to do different things, especially in our industry, because availability of products sell. And usually in manufacturing, there are lead time items, right? So don't do promotions and don't try to increase your average order value, but then don't put and not have the product on the shelf, because people typically are just not going to pull the trigger on that if it's not available and they need this other thing quickly. So if you want to sell the nuts and bolts and the seals to go with the bearing, then make sure the nuts, bolts, and seals are in stock with that bearing in stock so that they buy everything. And now you've increased the average order value, you've increased the conversion, and so on.
Yeah, and you are so right. I think the alignment between the marketing and the operations team is going to be so critical. Otherwise, you are going to be losing money in sending these discounts, and then people are not going to buy because the product itself is not there. So thank you so much for that insight. So Damon, what is your experience with respect to A/B testing? Have you seen any specific strategies working as it comes to A/B testing of different scenarios in your customer base?
I'm someone that likes to push the price every month. I mean, I like to have good pricing systems in place in our clients, because if you just take a 0.5% across most companies and do a 0.5% every month until you start to see something happening, something negative, or if nothing's negative is happening, keep going. Go another 0.5%, because you think about that on $100 item. I can't do the math right now, but it's not very much. It's not very much, right? It's very little, but that's all profit. That's all profit. Every little bit that you add on is more profit. And when you really look at how to create value in a business, that's what we're concentrating on. We're like, how do you eke value? And a lot of times, as several of the people have said, people don't look at price as a way to really increase your average order value size and your profit, because it's an easy way to do it, but it's not something that we intuitively think about as the first thing to try.
Yeah, and I would
Go ahead.
support that with this thought, which is, in my experience, most companies, especially smaller ones that aren't Patagonia and Amazon or whatever, they undervalue the things that they make. If you're a manufacturer, what you've done to build your business, you probably started in a garage. You were probably drying fabrics on the fence in your house, much to your spouse's chagrin. And the way that you came up with the cost of your product is you figured out how much it cost. So the wholesale cost, you figured out how much it cost you to do it at that time. And then you doubled it. And you said to your dealer, it cost me $20, so I'm going to charge you 40, and you can turn around and charge 80. And that's assuming a keystone margin along the way. But what they rarely do is, at some point in their business, ask themselves, what's the actual value of the thing that I'm building? And I'll give you an example of why this is really important, because I was talking with a cut and sew facility about their pricing, and they continue to do pricing where they basically time how long it takes to do stitch A and stitch B and stitch C, and they add all that up, and then they do this math, and they tack on some setup and takedown time at the end of each one, and then they say, well, for a certain number of units for you, it's going to cost me, let's say there's 400 units, it's going to cost me $1,600. So I'm going to charge you, it's going to cost me $4 a unit. So I'm going to charge you 8 or 10, whatever that number is. And so I asked this guy, well, so if you implement an entirely new digitized sewing system that cuts your production time in half, do you now charge those clients half as much for the product you make for them? And I think who gets to keep that money because you invested in an amazing system that allows you to develop stuff faster? And the answer most often is you should actually keep that. What it does is it gives you the opportunity to build in discount structures for larger purchases and maintain a higher margin, rather than just cutting your margin, or rather keeping your margin the same, destroying your contribution margin because of the investment you made in technology and just passing it on to your customers. So the value of what you sell is not the same as what you're charging for it. On a second note, Chris made a really interesting point about having stuff in stock. And I totally agree, with one exception, that COVID has changed the way people do business. It's changed our habits, and it's definitely changed the supply chain. And we have a lot more disruption coming our way at all levels of supply chain and logistics. And there are a number of really interesting companies who are out of stock of things and have decided to say, you know what, we're going to tell people it's out of stock, and we're going to allow them to buy it, and we're going to tell them this might not be available for 6 months. And they're selling the heck out of those things because they have a great brand, a great product, and people are basically lining up to buy it, which is what you want. So that's the one caveat to that. Otherwise, I completely agree.
Let me add one further step on that. I've seen someone doing the exact same thing that you just described, but in the meantime, because they're doing great with customer service and great with communication, they're selling people other stuff while they're waiting for the thing they bought first. Or they're saying, you know what, we have 10,000 people waiting for this item. Let's make an add-on, and they pre-sell it before they've even manufactured it, have it sent over, and they can generally package it up so you get both at the same time. But other than that, I also agree with Chris.
Yeah, I do think I agree with both of you. There are circumstances where you're not going to have inventory. So what you do need to do is have good messaging about when it's available, right? So as long as you're making sure that you're having good communication so that they can still make the buying decision. But when all else comes down to it, certainly product availability does help them pull the trigger.
Completely agree, guys. So you definitely have a lot of leverage, from the marketing side as well, as long as you are not taking forever to deliver the product. Otherwise, then marketing will stop working after a certain point. But you definitely have a lot of lever from the messaging perspective. So, guys, the only thing we can take at this point of time is going to be short closing advice. We have roughly 3 minutes before we close this session. So, Chris, I am going to start with you. A couple of sentences in terms of your closing advice.
Sure. The reason I brought up B2B to C is because we have a lot of companies, particularly in manufacturing, who have been historically selling to distribution and dealers, and their average order values are higher than when they move to selling direct. So once they start selling direct, the average order value gets reduced. So this is just one metric among many metrics, and it's why we need to segment the groups to make sure that we're analyzing that information. So I would also caution people on competing metrics, right? So if I'm trying to drive new traffic to the site, right? I want more traffic. Yeah. Well, if I start getting more traffic, that's not my existing customers. That's not the people that I've developed a relationship with who have been buying from me over time that might spend a little bit more. The new traffic is going to come in. Maybe they spend a little bit of money with you to get comfortable with you. That actual driving new traffic to your site might lower your average order value, but you're gaining new customers. So let's always remember that we might be trying to achieve different things. And if average order value falls while we're trying to achieve them, it might be overall revenue is still growing and the outcome is solid. So just some additional thoughts.
Yeah. Could not agree more. Love your advice. You are joy to listen to, Chris. Thank you so much for that. So, Damon, what is your closing advice as far as average order value goes?
Well, just try to increase it. Do something. I mean, that's the thing. Do something. Try some things. I mean, we talked about a lot of stuff, and a lot of it's easy to implement. But try some things to increase that average order value, because you don't know. You could make a heck of a difference with not very much effort.
And I agree. I think you need to have that monthly plan the way Damon always has for his clients. You definitely need to try that, each month. So thank you so much for that advice, Damon. Steve, what is going to be your closing advice?
Something similar to Damon's, in that I'm going to say, if you're an executive, use the concept of average order value as a wedge topic so that you can change the way everybody in your company thinks, and end up tying average order value and all these other activities that you can do to increase the profitability of your company, tie it back around to contribution margin and customer satisfaction. And it's basically like, it's one of those great topics that when you introduce it to an executive team, everybody can follow along with it and see the possibilities inside it. So it's a great wedge topic to drive a positive change in terms of generating profit and a better bottom line.
Could not agree more. And in my opinion, I think that should be part of the comp. If I were there, then I would actually make it part of the comp, and then things happen automatic. You don't have to drive that anymore. Thank you so much for that, Steve. Ben, what is your closing advice as far as average order value goes?
I think I'd just like to echo what everyone else has just said, because it's great advice. We've talked about a lot of really interesting things on this topic. Find one that resonates for your company, for where you are at the moment. Don't do them all at once. Just grab 2 or 3 and let's test them. Let's split test them and just see what's going to work. And if none of them work, awesome. I think we talked about like 30 different topics or tactics in this call. Just listen back and try something else. Figure out what's going to work for your company. You know your industry, you know your market. We've talked about a lot. There's a lot there for you to dive into. Just go for it. To Damon's point, just do something and try it. See how it goes.
Could not agree more. Love it, man. On that note, thank you so much, guys. See you next week.
Thank you,
everyone.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Steve Rice, head over to .comjungle.com. It's GOTCOMJUNGLE.com. If you want to learn more about Chris Harrington, head over to genalpha.com. It's GENALPHA.com. If you want to learn more about Ben Searcy, head over to shootsta.com. It's shootsta.com. If you want to learn more about Damon Pistolka, head over to exityourway.us. It's exityourway.us. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Rani Teja, who discusses the upsell and cross-sell strategies for e-commerce merchants and how you might be able to increase the average order value for your customers. Also, the interview with Andrew Deutsch, who discusses pricing and discounting strategies for companies. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.